Hello everybody, welcome back to episode 3 of Stocks on the Rocks. For those of you that are new here, my name is Chris and this show is dedicated to discussing all things investing, finance and business with the goal of helping you build and grow a long-term investment portfolio. Now, before we get into today's show, I do have to mention that all information and opinions provided are just that, opinions only, and should not be used for anything other than entertainment purposes only. Now, as well as that, this should not be conceived as financial advice. You should discuss all investment choices with a qualified professional. Now that is over with, today's episode is going to be filled to the brim. We're going to kick things off by going over my opinions on the $10,000 Australian super withdrawal scheme, and then we'll move on to answering some really interesting questions that you guys shot across to me throughout the week, covering Aussie stocks, trend trading, superannuation funds versus index funds, and what I would do if I was starting investing now from day one. Now, for those of you that are listening to this podcast on the usual podcast apps, keep in mind that this is actually now available in video form on the YouTube channel Compounding Everything. Feel free to come across there and check it out if that is your thing. So like I said a bit earlier, we are going to kick this off by discussing the $10,000 super withdrawal scheme. I mean, I'm sure all of you remember back in March when the government was announcing all of these measures to try and sort of relieve some of the economic pressures coming from COVID-19. One of the steps taken, of course, was to allow people that met a certain criteria to access their superannuation funds via two $10,000 withdrawals. Now, this has been a hot topic over the last couple of months. Of course, planners and fund providers are furious and you know, saying, don't do it, don't withdraw the $10,000. And I mean, I'm sure there's no bias at all from those guys. I mean, it's not like they're losing money or anything. But nonetheless, I did think it was worth me going in and talking about some of the negatives here and then also talking about what I actually like about this scheme and how I think it could be beneficial to some people. So when we talk about the negatives, I think it's probably easier to start here with the most obvious one, which is the trust system that kind of surrounds this service or the withdrawal of this money to begin with. And I mean, for those of you that have done this process, from what I have learned, it was as simple as going online to the ATO website, filling out a form where you checked boxes and said you do meet certain criteria, and then I believe it was either a digital signature or you pressed just I agree box and submitted it. And then from what I'm told, several weeks later, people started receiving $10,000. So it was a very easy process. I know that there has been a lot of attention around this in the media in the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks where the ATO have been saying, look, we know people have been scamming this system and we are going to track them down. Whether they can do that or not is a different story because I imagine that this has been widespread. However, nonetheless, I think the first flaw here was definitely the trust system. Now, that's not to say they had a better option here. When all of this was happening, I mean, everything was hitting the fan in every government department. Centrelink wouldn't have been able to take calls to vet these applications any better. And ATO just would not have had the manpower to enforce conditions more strictly through the means of, say, someone having to call up or send in paperwork that was more of a physical document, because that all has to be checked by a human, and they just don't have the manpower for that at the moment. And I know since that point, I think the ATO and Centrelink have both been on a hiring spree, but that was probably just to cover the influx that they received in normal circumstances around COVID to begin with. I don't think it's so they can up these systems in any meaningful way, because they probably know as well as any that when budgets are cut, those things will be the first to go. So they're probably not going to put the effort in to try and improve these systems. And although we're not discussing this at the moment, I think you can see the exact same things happening with the JobKeeper and JobSeeker systems, is that they are so under-resourced. The JobKeeper process was a matter of going online, checking a couple of boxes and you're done. So, I mean, yes, I think that will be interesting to watch what comes out of this. But nonetheless, I think that people abusing the system and claiming when they perhaps shouldn't have been will be an interesting one to watch over the next couple of months or probably years as it plays out, because it will take a long time for all of this to play out. Now, the other negative I think is worth mentioning here would be that it's possible that some people would be in a worse position when they retired. And I don't say that loosely. I just say it lightly in some ways, because I'm not sure that $20,000 would overly affect someone that is late ages now, unless they'd already neglected their super fund. Now, yes, if you were a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old and maybe your super balance wasn't too high, then a $20,000 withdrawal, yeah, I mean, that can, when you take into account compounded interest, that can definitely play a part on what, on affecting your portfolio long term. My concern there is, and this is something I talk about all day, so I mean, let me know if you guys want a video dedicated to this, but essentially my concern is that superannuation, generally speaking, underperforms the market and has ridiculous fees. So if you guys, like I said, if you want a video of me breaking down superannuation funds versus self-managed super, because you can really only compare the two in a direct sense. If we're trying to bring in index funds here from a personal perspective, I think you have to really start looking into tax then pretty deeply, and that's something that is probably not going to be beneficial for most Australians to do. But when you're comparing super funds and self-managed super funds, there's so much to cover, and I'd love to talk about that if you guys are interested. So feel free to comment below if you're watching this on YouTube and let me know if you'd like to see that. But I think when you take all factors into account, I think people being potentially in a worse situation is possible. What are we talking about here? I mean, let's say that the average Australian, I think the average Australian wage is $70,000 or $80,000 now, but I don't like to think of it like that. I like to think of the average Australian, especially that would be affected in situations like this, is probably on 50 to 60K, right? Like, I think that's fair to say. And when we look at this that way, you're looking at 9.5% compulsory contributions from employers. So you're maybe getting $5-ish grand being contributed to your super fund every year. Then you take your 15% tax off the top of that for employer contributions. So, you're left with roughly $4,400 or whatever it might be. That's going into that super fund every year. So to make up $20,000, we're looking at just under 5 years, 4.5 years there, and of contributions. So yes, I guess that is 1/10 of the average Australian's working career. So it is a meaningful amount. But I don't think it's as bad as planners are making it sound and fund managers are making it sound, because it's not going to cripple you. And this is what brings me to my next point. And I want to back up why I've said that, because a lot of people probably disagreeing and going, well, no, that these people might not be putting a lot into their super. Maybe they've, abused it or not done it correctly. And that's true. But I want to talk about the situation in which I think people could be withdrawing these funds for and how I think that could be a positive. Because the abuse of this system and just taking it and buying a new telly or whatever it might be, that's not what I'm talking about here. Yes, that's to detriment of your future portfolio and super fund. If you're just pulling out this to buy a TV and to fix up your car or to upgrade something, you're going to be in a worse off position. But what I think some of the positives are here is that people could potentially put themselves in a stronger position in life by taking these funds and, first of all, paying off bad debt. I mean, when we're talking about bad debt, I like to think that the easiest form of bad debt to sort of justify paying off in bulk is credit card debt. I mean, you can be paying anywhere between 15 and 25% credit card interest on that debt. And I mean, that's so high, it is just insane. If you've got a $10,000 credit card debt, you could be paying, just ridiculous amounts every month, $250, $300 interest a month. And that adds up dramatically. If you can only afford to pay off $500, and that's for some people really pushing it every month on that credit card, then you're not making much headway at all. It'll take you years and years and years, 5, 10, 15 years to pay off that card. So if you can withdraw from your super right now and you're in a position where it's going to benefit you fundamentally as a person, your finances are going to be improved, which then leads to you having a better economic impact on what is happening around you in the sense of being able to support yourself, potentially not having to take money from other places that could have been spent better, whether that being from government, assistance and other stuff like that. So yes, I think if you're pulling this money out to pay off bad debt, I would do that if I was in that position. I would be pulling this out and I'd be paying off that credit card debt, because at the end of the day, I'm going to be significantly better off in 10 years because I paid off that debt, and my super will be well and truly recovered by that point in time because I pulled out 10 grand, especially if I just put that money that I would have paid into the credit card back into my super fund, if you are that way inclined. Like I said, in a future video, we can break down whether I think that is beneficial or not to be putting money into your super or into your own personal investments. But nonetheless, in this example, you could take that 10 grand that you would have paid back to your credit card and put in your super fund anyway. So you're still going to be significantly better off because the interest has been removed from that equation. So that's one reason, paying off bad debt. And it doesn't have to be credit cards. I mean, I think I read an article and the math seemed to work where anything over around 12.5% interest in this situation was actually more beneficial for the person to pay off their debt than keep it in a superannuation fund. If I can try and find that article, I'll try and search it up here. And if I can find it, I'll put it in the links below. Hopefully I can. You guys will know by the time I've posted this. Now, so yes, we've got paying off bad debt. That's out of the road. Check that box off because it's a very valid reason if it's been used for that. And if you've done that, good on you because you've made a great choice. Now, that brings me to my next point, which is if you're in a position where you might have a small business or you might be thinking of starting a small business, these funds could definitely be dispersed in a way that could be beneficial for you and the economy long term. I mean, after all, that is the point of what the government is trying to do here, is stimulate the economy. So if you can create jobs in 5 years or 3 years or 2 years, then you're doing a great thing. So it's better than you going down to JB and buying a $10,000 TV and a $2,000 stereo or whatever it might be, you know? So I think if you're in that situation where you've got a small business and these funds can be used to grow that business or put that business in a more sustainable position, whether that be by, down paying, leases you might have or assets that have loans attached to them, whatever it might be. But if you can put your business in a stronger position, then that's definitely going to help you. And if you do happen to have a small business already, I think it's worth remembering that you probably already received the $20,000 payout from the government, which was a cash bonus a little earlier in the year, probably about 2 months ago now that was. I mean, so using that to pay down debt or to expand, depending on your situation, can be greatly beneficial for you and the community around you, which benefits everybody. If we have 1,000 small businesses in every suburb that are thriving because of this super withdrawal, that's going to help the economy, grow rapidly. So that's what we want. That was the point of all of this. So that would be a second positive, is if you're in a position where you can either strengthen your small business or you are starting a small business that is going to strengthen the economy, then once again, that's going to be doing a great thing. And it's a very valid reason to be withdrawing your super. And that brings us to the question that you all asked me, which was, should we be pulling $10,000 out of our superannuation funds and investing it in the market? This is a very complicated question to answer, and I will try and do the best I can here. The first thing to remember is that depends on you and your personal situation. It depends on the tax bracket you're in. It depends on your ability to invest those funds. It depends on a lot of different factors. And it also depends on whether or not you have the patience to treat that investment like your superannuation fund treats investment. Now, before we go into those steps on, taxation and other things like that, it is worth kind of mentioning superannuation fund returns. And it's a very controversial subject that I noticed that not many people online seem to talk about. And it's one that I am very interested in putting something together for you guys. So if you are interested in a video where I compare super funds to ETFs or index funds, then please comment below or send me an email if you're listening to this podcast and you don't have a comment section at compoundingeverything@gmail.com. Because the reason for that is that a lot of superannuation funds, and when I say a lot, the majority, more than 50%, do not outperform the general index funds that track the market in Australia or internationally. I did a bit of research into this week, and it was surprising to me to see that a lot of the major players in Australia, the ones that, I'm not going to name names here because I don't know if I can do that, but the major players, the names you know and I know, they underperform the market by quite a lot when you break up like a 10, 20 year period. They all advertise these amazing 1 and 5 year returns, but when you look at their 20 and 10 year returns, a lot of them, 70 or 80% of them, are underperforming the market, and by quite a few percentage points. Now, of course, then you have the ones that are beating the market, and there are, I would guess from what I read, and this isn't in-depth research because I probably only looked at 70 or 80 funds, and there are hundreds of them, but you're looking at about 18% of super funds that tend to beat the market, and that's over a 10-year period. I couldn't find information over 20 and 30-year periods on a lot of these funds. I would guess because of two factors. One, they may not have existed that long ago. And the second is that they just might not be bound to report that information, and they probably don't want to for whatever reasons. You can take away that from what you will. But if we look at the standard industry fund, they're underperforming the market. If we look at the performers, the ones that actually do what they say they'll do, they are meeting the market. Not many are beating it. The 18 or odd percent that are beating it would probably be within 1 or 2% of what an index fund like VAS returned over the last 20 or 30 years, and would probably not actually be within the realms of the S&P 500 at all. When I say that, they're probably 2 or 3% off the S&P 500 over 100 years. So it's a debatable topic, but if I was in this situation, if I was eligible to withdraw the $10,000 from my super and I was going to invest it in the market, I would want to make sure of a couple of things here. I would want to know that, one, I wasn't going to be left in a detrimental position because I was paying too much tax on that investment, which means you probably don't want to be investing in dividends with those funds unless that math works out for you in your exact bracket that you're in taxation-wise. You would be looking at capital growth, like a lot of superannuation funds do for the most part for younger people, and you're in those aggressive funds as a young person. A lot of them are capital growth funds. And in that situation, by capital growth, you may be better off. If you can find an index fund or an ETF that tracks a market that is based on capital growth and not dividend payments, and it's got consistent returns. And when I mean consistent, at least 10 years of beating the market or matching the market, 20 and 30 if preferable, and not just matching or beating the market, but beating the returns of your superannuation fund, because that is incredibly important. You're pulling this money out of your super because you think you can do better with it yourself. So you need to know you can actually do that if you're going to do it. And that is not, generally speaking, in the way of stock picking. Now, unless you are a veteran pro, you've got a massive portfolio already, and it's not your self-managed super fund, because a lot of guys already do that in the self-managed super fund. It's a fund that is privately managed, or maybe within a company structure or whatever it might be. That is going to be a situation where maybe then you go, great, I'm going to take the 10,000 out because I know I'm going to get a 12.5% return on that for the next 20, 30 years. And it's going to beat super. So fine, whatever, it's worth it. But most of us are not in that position. Most of us don't have a record of beating the market for 20 years. Most of us don't have a record of outperforming an index fund for the last 20 or 30 years. You very well may have a record of outperforming your superannuation fund. I'd believe that, because it's not hard to do. But when it comes to outperforming the market as a whole, that's a whole different ballgame over a long period of time. Not many people can do it. So, it's worth remembering there that if you're pulling that money out to invest it yourself, you better be sure that you can beat the market. Otherwise, you're kidding yourself, because if you're stock picking with that $10,000 and you lose 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or all of it, or it's stuck in a security that is just underperforming for 10, 20 years, then you're going to be in a worse off position, even if you take into account ridiculous superannuation fees and things like that. So what I would do if I was in that position is pretty simple at this point in time. I would find a capital growth index fund via the form of an ETF that was low management costs, and I would invest in it. And I'd forget about it, and that would be it. There wouldn't be too much thought put into it. Now, it would be different if I had a stock right now that I really loved and I thought I could buy it at a margin of safety, like I've spoken to you guys about 1,000 times before, but I don't, and I would either put it in an index fund or I'd leave it in my super fund. So, yes, that's my thoughts on that. And when it comes to withdrawing the $10,000 or the $20,000. I think there are a lot of benefits to schemes like this for eligible Australians that are savvy enough to take advantage of it. However, from what I've seen in the real world, most using this money is in ways that are not really benefiting anybody except themselves. And, I think what is great, the only thing that I believe is great about our superannuation system, and if you haven't picked up already, I'm not a big fan of the way it's run, period. But the one thing I love about the Australian superannuation system is that it will put almost all of us that are at a young age now in a significantly better position when we are retiring. Our parents and their parents did not have that benefit. It was all on their own backs. It was all on their own accord. Sometimes they had pensions and stuff, but it was not meaningful. Whereas superannuation funds for the average Australian working full-time over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years will be greatly affected in a positive way by that being there. So that's what I like. What I don't like comes in and it's a long list of fees and rubbish surrounding it. And that's for another video and conversation. So if you guys want me to talk about that as well, let me know, and I'll definitely jump on board there. Anyway, I think we've pretty much covered that. If you guys have any opinions on it, let me know. I'm more than happy to listen to them. There's a lot of things I didn't cover in that conversation. There's so many variables when it comes to that exact situation. It seems so simple. It's not. There are a lot of variables there that you have to take into account if you're really thinking about that as a long-term investment. Anyway, that moves us on to the question section of the podcast, which the first one is coming from Kane. Now, Kane, this is your second question, actually. You managed to get on 2 weeks in a row, so nice work there. Kane has asked, "Hi, mate, could you please talk about airline stocks, mainly QAN, Qantas, and AIZ, Air New Zealand? I think the price will come back steadily. What's your view? Thanks." Well, thank you, Kane, for the question. It's a good one. This is an interesting one. I've been reading a lot of articles all week on Qantas, especially, and Virgin, of course, which isn't part of your question, but nonetheless is still part of this industry. When it comes to Qantas and Air New Zealand, although I'm not interested in investing myself at these levels, and I'm probably maybe not at all because I'm not a huge fan of that type of industry. It's so capital intensive. They have incredible business models and such interesting, loyal customer bases. Qantas is obvious. I mean, the Flying Kangaroo has been part of Australia for the last 100 and something years and will continue to be for a very long time. It's not Ansett. It's not Virgin. It is a thoroughbred part of Australia and will continue to be. Now, in what financial model, and if that financial model is profitable, I would guess yes, but no one knows. I mean, they've got pretty decent return on equity and pretty decent figures when it comes to their books. I mean, they trade at a bit of a premium, but that's to be expected when you've got an airline that actually makes money. Qantas themselves, I'm a huge fan of the company. I'm very jealous of Alan Joyce. I mean, that salary, holy moly. That is one hell of a salary. What was it last check? $32 million, I think he cleared last year. Not cleared, sorry, but he got last year before tax, $32 million. Just insane. Now, that brings us on to Air New Zealand, and I'm not as sort of abreast of everything that is happening with Air New Zealand on a weekly basis as I am Qantas. I watch Qantas very closely. It's just an interesting company. However, I have pulled up Air New Zealand's figures here, and not as impressive as Qantas, but still profitable, and still, in the airline industry, they're doing well. And I think it's because they've got their market too. And that's the thing I am familiar with Air New Zealand. I had my first experience with them 10 years ago when a Qantas flight from, where was I going? I was going from Sydney to LA, and my flight was cancelled, and I was diverted from Sydney to Auckland, and I was put on an Air New Zealand flight. And that was the best flight I've ever been on in my life. I mean, it was back then. It was just they had the best offering. Their staff were amazing. Everything was amazing. And since then, they've grown tenfold, and they're doing an incredible job. They've got a great following of people that are happy to go through New Zealand from Sydney to get to locations because they've got that great of a service. And you guys will probably get to know that when I talk about companies, although I love the financials, I'm just as much interested in their following and their story and what the experience is like when you're dealing with them, because I believe that is just as important as the financials. As crazy as that sounds, I think that knowing a company and loving a company and knowing, you know what, I actually would call them if I needed something, is one of the best indicators. And in this situation for Qantas and Air New Zealand, I would call them both. The only problem I have with Qantas is that they're so expensive. But other than that, they're a great service. I've never had problems with them. They've got a good loyalty program and things like that. So I like both the airlines. I wouldn't be buying them right now. It's not something I'm interested in, but I think they're great companies. So take that for what you will. It's interesting. So when it comes to Virgin, it's interesting. I'm not going to spend too much time covering them because, let's be honest, their books are shocking. I mean, before all of this, before COVID, they had some of the worst books I've ever seen. When it comes to a company that has a brand name like Virgin, I mean, they're all over the world. Richard Branson, everything. The books were horrendous. I mean, absolutely horrendous. So Bain Capital looks like they have now come to an agreement with Deloitte. Sirius or Cyrus Capital look like they pulled out, which is probably a good move from them. I mean, I don't know the details of these deals. And both of these guys said they had structures where they believed they were going to revamp the company and turn it into something new. And hopefully they do. I mean, good luck to you. But imagine taking on all of that debt. I mean, there is so much debt there just to be able to revamp. I mean, they would have done the math better than I have, but I mean, yeah, it's a very interesting model. I would not want to touch Virgin with a 10-foot pole. I wouldn't go anywhere near it. Only thing I like about Virgin, the only thing I've ever liked about Virgin is they've got cheap flights. That's it. I've never really liked their service. I've never really liked the quality of the seating on the planes and things like that. I've never really enjoyed their service. So I don't like them. I don't like their financials. And I don't like the offering now. I mean, you could offer me their share price. I mean, you could offer me their shares at the price they were before they went off the market for a while now, and wasn't even interested. I want no part of it because there's just no valuation that seems attractive in that sense. So anyway, that's enough ranting from me. The next question comes from Purple Cow, and Purple Cow has asked, I'd love to hear about jumping on trends, aka ATP and Mesoblast, and when should you jump on the bandwagon, and should you jump on at all? Well, Purple Cow, thank you for the question. That's a great one. Look, I have mixed feelings on this. And for those that don't know, APT is Afterpay. And right now, I'm not about jumping on bandwagons. The risk is on. I mean, the risk is on right now. And you are taking all of that risk when you jump on board APT. You are taking it all. So if you would have asked 2017, Chris, when I was trading, would I have purchased Afterpay now on a trend play? No. Would I have purchased Afterpay at $8 when they crashed? Yes, definitely. I would have been all over the volume that was going into that at that point in time. There was, worst case for me as a trader at that point in time, there would have been some sort of reversal, and if not, my stop would have been hit. But it would have been a risk I was definitely willing to take once they started recovering from the bottom there. So back then, yes, I would have played that trend, especially off the volume that was going in. It was just a ridiculous amount of volume going in. Like Zip and Split, I mean, the volume that's been going into those stocks, in 2017, they would have been trades for me, no doubt, 100%, wouldn't have even questioned it. Now, however, no, I don't want anything to do with them. I'm not following trends. If that's your style, and I don't judge that because there are so many people that make a living off day trading, and whether you beat the market or not is a discussion for another day. That who really cares? If that's what you want to do and you're happy doing it, do it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. So when it comes to me personally, no, I'm not a fan of jumping on trends. In saying that, I wouldn't judge anyone that did. It's a personal choice. I don't think that if you're a new investor, however, asking me this question, Purple Cow, if you're not sure, if you aren't in this game yet and you don't fully understand it, which is perfectly fine, that's what this channel is for, it's probably better staying on the sidelines or finding something that's more suitable to your risk profile. Because at this point in time, like I said, the risk is as on as it could be for Afterpay and even Mesoblast. Now, I'm not overly familiar with Mesoblast. I've seen them floating around the last couple of weeks. I've heard some of their story, but it doesn't interest me. If you guys are interested in me talking more about them, I'll definitely do more research on them and I'll dig around and I'll talk to the people I know in the game and see what they think as well. But it's not something I've looked at. It just doesn't fit my model anymore, so I haven't been paying attention to them. But Afterpay, I mean, if you're not sure and you're asking this question, you've probably got your answer already. So I hope that helps, Purple Cow. Now, this next question has come from Henry, and Henry has asked, putting money in your super versus index funds, strategies to achieve financial independence or early retirement. Okay, so Henry is asking here, is it worth you putting money into your super versus an index fund? And what's a good strategy to achieve financial independence or early retirement, which is all part of that FIRE movement that's very popular at the moment. Now, look, when it comes to super fund versus index fund, that, like I said before, and we did cover this a little bit earlier in the podcast, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. That depends on a couple of things, and the most important of the first two. Are you in a self-managed super fund or are you in a standard super fund? Are you managing your own super, which gives you control then and the tax benefits of having that control, or are you just giving your money to a superannuation fund who's taking 1% or whatever it might be from you every year in management fees and still underperforming the market? Not all, but the average is underperforming the market. So if you look at this from a perspective of, like I said, you want capital growth, you're not looking for dividends, then it is quite possible that it could be an option for somebody to put money into an index fund or an exchange traded fund over a super fund. However, that is not something I would recommend without you doing a lot of research and then talking to a qualified professional. And I really mean this. Everyone says this on all these things: talk to a professional, talk to your advisor. In this situation, it is probably the most important situation for you to go and talk to an advisor. You might not even have one. We always say this. It's on the wall behind me. If you don't have an advisor and you're thinking about doing this, go sit with one. Go down to your local advisor, do your research, look at their reviews, talk to people in the community, see who you can trust, and go and talk to them. Because it depends on so many variables that I can't address in this video. I don't know what tax bracket you're on. I don't know how much, I don't even know if you have an income at all. I don't know how much money you're investing. I don't know what your investment style is. I don't know if you want dividends or if you're going to live off those dividends. I don't know if you want capital growth. There's a lot to cover there, Henry. So it's a very hard question for me to answer. However, when it comes to strategies for financial independence or early retirement, it is simple. And I know that I coming into question 4 and 5, they kind of come together on this subject. So we will move into that question now because it's going to answer the second part of your question, Henry. And this question comes from, it's a hybrid question from Vision and Jared, who have both asked, Vision is 18 and Jared is 21. And they've essentially said, hey, I want to use the power of compounding interest for myself. Would ETFs be the ideal option, or what else is a better option? And Jared has also said, how would you approach investing if you're 21, if you'd already established an emergency fund? Now, as far as I'm concerned, I have the same answer for myself for both of these questions. This answer isn't for you because it can't be, but what am I doing if I'm 21 or 18 right now? The first thing is I'm taking as much of my salary as I can and I'm investing it in a secure fund. I am putting it in something that is going to benefit me via the forms of compounding interest for a long period of time. I am going to focus on minimizing my tax throughout this period. Now, that will mean different things for different people, but for me, I'm going to get as much money as I can from my wage and any side hustle and anything else I can do, and I'm going to put it into the market, and I'm going to get that working for me from day dot. My first job was at 14 or 13 years old or whatever it was, and it was at Hungry Jack's, and I was making $6.20 an hour, and I remember working 10 or 20 hours a week and thinking, man, I'm getting $60 here. And it was like nothing at the time. But if I would have put that $60 into almost any major index fund in that period every week, and I could have because I was living at home, I had no expenses, I was at school, I didn't need money, then it would have worked out for me very, very well. So I know a large part of the demographic of this podcast is between 18 and 40-ish years old. If you're on the lower end of that spectrum, go to Noel Whittaker's website. Now, I don't know much about Noel Whittaker. I know he has a lot of books and things like that. I don't know anything about him personally. But I know he's got this amazing calculator on his website that is a compounding interest calculator. It is saved on every computer I have in my favorites. And whenever I'm feeling down, whenever I feel like this value investing lifestyle isn't working for me because I want to get in the market and it's exciting and it's fun, I go to this compounding interest calculator. I put in the interest amount that I believe I'm going to achieve over the next 30 or 40 years. I put in the amount I'm willing to contribute to the fund and the amount I've got in it now. And you'll see what I mean by this when you go to the website, and it shows you year by year what interest you're making, what your total amount, what your investment amount is going to be, and then the compounding effect starts to happen. And when you get to 15 and 20 years, it is magic. It is something that will inspire you to want to get started. So for you guys, especially Vision and Jared, and Henry, who asked a similar question, which is what is a good strategy? Find your strategy by understanding first how much you can actually make just by using compounded interest. I know this is such an obvious thing to say, but go and use that calculator. Put in a percentage that you're comfortable with. Now, what I put in is the percentage of a 100-year return on a fund that I believe is going to continue providing that return. It might be the S&P 500, or it might be the ASX 200. Generally speaking, is the S&P 500 because you actually have 100 plus year returns on that. So I put in that amount. and I let the calculator do the rest, and it just lets you understand the power of compounding interest, because it is the most magical thing in this investing world, period. In the first few years, you're grounding away. But if you speak to any 30, 40, 50, 60-year-old, they will all say to you, the ones that didn't do this will say, I wish I could go back to 18 and just put money in the market. They might not change their investing style, they might not do anything else, but they would just have money in the market from an earlier age. You have one advantage right now. You've got no experience, you've got nothing going for you in the sense of the stock market world. What you have is age. And that age is something you can never get back. You need to get to a planner, figure out your strategy, and get money into the market. And figure out if that's going to be better suited to you via an index fund or a self-managed super fund or just your standard super fund or whatever it might be. At your age, a self-managed super fund probably isn't an option. But you have to look at that and figure out what's best for you. But all I can recommend is just get your money in the market. It doesn't matter what it is. I mean, people can debate all day whether it's property or whether it's stocks or whether it's wine or whether it's whiskey. It doesn't matter what it is. Get your money in the market and start making compounding interest work for you. Now, the final question for today's episode has come in from Dan. And Dan has asked us, what does your emergency fund look like and what is your investment portfolio like at the moment? Dan, great question. And I can answer one of those things, and I'll explain the second half to that question in a second. Now, when it comes to emergency funds, I personally, and I think I've mentioned this a few times on the channel from memory, I personally had a 3-month emergency fund, and the reason is I'm a small business owner. I like to deploy capital, whether it be into the market or into my business. I don't like money just sitting there. Although it offsets my mortgage, I can get better returns elsewhere. So I normally would have a 3-month emergency fund, and that is solely because I'm in business and, I've got a mortgage, my wife and I have expenses, we've got things we have to cover. So in this situation, a few months ago with COVID, I decided to take my emergency fund up from 3 months to 6 months, and then ultimately within a couple of days, I decided actually 12 months was better when I did the math. Took that up to 12 months, and we moved capital around, and we took our emergency fund up to a 12-month timeline. Now, for us, what that covers is all expenses on a monthly basis times 12. All personal expenses, whether it be mortgage, groceries, bills, car repayments, whatever it might be, all of those things times 12, and that's where we got our emergency fund to. Now, the reason I did that is because one of my businesses is very much susceptible to a recession, and I've known this for many years, and I was very much prepared for it, and I actually thought by now it would have already happened in this COVID mess. But one of my businesses is in IT, like I've told you guys before. A section of that business is in web design and marketing. Now, we have roughly 450 clients that we host their website for, and we have about 200 clients that we help with their marketing. And in that capacity, as you guys can imagine, the first thing to go when people, small businesses and medium businesses, are hit with lowering costs and not having as much income as marketing. We know that that's how it works. I mean, we do the same if we don't believe that marketing is going to be beneficial for us in the short term. So to this point, I was very surprised. We did have a 20-30% drop off in accounts for that period with that section of our business. However, I was very much aware that over the next 12 to 18 months, I do think in a micro and macroeconomic sense, we are going to have some form of kick through on what has happened. And I think that will affect my business directly. So we have a 12-month emergency fund because I need to make sure that I can walk into that office and not have to worry about paying myself if stuff hits the fan. I need to go, okay, I can run this business, I can keep my staff employed, I can do everything I've got to do, and home's fine. I don't have to worry about home. Home's all good. And that is the only reason we've bumped our emergency fund up to 12 months. The second reason is a bonus reason, which is offsetting our mortgage. I mean, and it does save us, I think we're probably saving maybe $800 a month now on our mortgage thanks to that 12-month emergency fund. However, in this situation, I'm only being affected by 50% of my sort of income. My wife has a company that I'm part owner in, and that is a real estate. And that real estate is not really affected too much by COVID in a meaningful sense, like we're losing half or any crazy amount of income. And the reason for that is because in real estate, you normally gain income by two means. And the first is the sale of property, and whether that be income in and outgoing is irrelevant. There is still a commission attached to that sale. And the second is the rent roll, property management. Now, although property management is susceptible to recessions, generally speaking, if you've looked after your customers and they like your service, they'll come to you for the sale of the property, which then will make up any potential losses you would have had on the loss of the rent roll income or property management income over that same period. So for me, that's my situation when it comes to emergency funds. It's 12 months, and I hope that explains why I've got 12 months, because it is high. I don't think the average person needs 12 months. I think at this point in time, with everything that's going on, you could deploy that in so many ways, and it would be much more beneficial for you. But for me, I had to take precautions, and I had to make sure that home was okay for worst case 12 months if everything hit the fan. And realistically, a 12-month emergency fund in my situation is probably going to be good for 36 months or 50 months, because we wouldn't lose all of our income at any one given point in time. So that sort of justifies that. But yes, it is a lot. And I don't think you guys should model my system in this sense, because you might only need 3 months. You might only need 1 month. You might only need 6 months. I don't know. It depends on your personal commitments and obligations when it comes to things that are going on around you in your life. Now, the second part of that question from Dan was my personal portfolio. Now, I don't discuss my personal portfolio on the channel or in these episodes. And the reason for that is because I don't want to influence people's decisions directly via what I have purchased in the past and what I'm purchasing now. And there's various reasons for that. The first is that the investment portfolio isn't just mine. Of course, it's my wife's as well. And, I would want her to be completely comfortable in sharing all of her investments on this channel. And I don't think that's fair of me to ask to go, hey, I'm going to share all of your investments too. Because it's a very personal choice. She didn't start this channel, I did. And for me, my workaround for that is going to be simple. I mentioned this in, I think it was the bubble video, the Afterpay and Zip bubble video. I said, if this video gets 2,500 likes, we will open a public-facing portfolio. That will be a portfolio that starts from scratch. I will take an amount of cash, I will put it in that portfolio, and we will start investing it together. It will be fully transparent. You guys will be able to monitor the portfolio even away from the channel via a link, and you guys will be able to see what I'm doing, when I'm doing it, and why I'm doing it. That doesn't mean you should copy me. It just means that I'm going to be fully transparent in the investments I'm making from that point forward inside of that portfolio. Like I said, if that video, which you'll be able to find on the channel, is called, I think, is this a buy now, pay later bubble or something like that? It was a week ago. You'll be able to see it there. And if that gets 2,500 likes, I'm going to open the fund. Now, I think at the moment it's actually almost at 2,000 likes. So it's getting like 100 likes every day. So we should be there in maybe a week. But if not, if you haven't already, go over and press like on that video, because it'll help out getting that target sooner. So anyway, I hope that helps answer your question, Dan. Now, guys, that does bring us to the end of this episode. We covered a lot. It kind of crept up on us here. I'm not sure where we're up to on time with this one. On my new setup, I can't actually see how long I've been recording for. So it's anyone's guess, but I hope it wasn't too long, guys. Thank you for being here. And we will be back again next week. All Stocks on the Rocks episodes will be coming out at 7:30 p.m. on a Sunday night from now on all platforms. So I know I was previously putting up the audio version earlier in the week. I don't even know what day I was doing. I was just posting it. And then the YouTube one was coming up on Sundays. All versions will be posted at the exact same time now, 7:30 p.m. on a Sunday. So you guys will be able to find it on all the normal podcast providers, and you'll be able to find it on the YouTube channel. Anyway, guys, I hope you all enjoyed this episode. We covered a lot, and we went over a couple of topics that are very much opinionated from me and a personal choice, so don't feel like you have to agree with me on all of them. Thank you all for making it here to the end. You guys are incredible, and I will see you all in our next episode. For those of you that haven't already, head over to Compound and Everything and check out the videos that I put out every Tuesday or Wednesday discussing all sorts of Australian stocks and what's going on in the marketplace. And thanks again, guys. I will talk to you all soon. Cheers.